einen. Oh. One day I will learn it, that I start now in English and no longer disappointing my German audience with this one sentence switching to English. Welcome to the lovely Chalet de Corpel. In the background, you see my well-created but not yet ironed background. A learning from our master of cool designs. Aside Vincent van Gogh, we do have the brick wall, such as we had just an interesting discussion about music we love, and such as Pink Floyd, The Wall, or the Hopes, the Hill of Hopes.
High Hopes.
Hill of High Hopes were an interesting topic, and I would like to welcome you. It's cool that you are with us again, and fabulous Phil Winters is again our guest. We couldn't get enough, so we hope you as well, because we had so much fun, we had so much topics we did not touch, and we had such an idea of how driving to your benefit the discussion, and a bit a controversial discussion this time, that you have a bit more impact and the touch and feel that we drive this for your advantage, and that we drive in the way of what I would call edutainment. Yeah, it should be fun, it should be informative, and it should be the drive forward. And hello, Winfried. So cool you are with us again after such a long time. And yes, coming to the background, Phil was the one who gave us the inspiration, such as if there are no halos, so using green screen, it can look even better. And the system technology, such as meltdown of the coprocessors in my old machine, is not yet happening again. So this was cool advice.
Apple just released new high-end machines. Get yourself one for 5,000 euros.
Yeah, and a great Phil fan. That's a cool
Ralph, I'll tell you, I like your background. It just needs to be ironed, but I really like it. It's really nice. It's much happier than mine.
Well, let's put it that way. It is a differentiator. Yeah.
Okay.
Both.
Yep.
And for me, it was a learning curve, such as I have one with the look in the garden and the one here out of the chalet erker, or how you would call it. And Phil is a famous person. Phil is the father of customer intelligence, and a lot of things he is said to be. Now, we came to a point that
sad to be or said to be.
People tell about him that he is, oh Jesus. Sometimes English language is a little hurdle for me, so I go with.
I thought that was lovely, because let me just start with the father of customer intelligence. Do you know what somebody said to me the other day? It was 30-something, really, really bright. She's really, really good. She just looked at me and went, "The father of customer intelligence. Doesn't that just mean you're old?"
Well,
oh man!
To my passport, there are certain distinctions I could make.
Yeah,
but from the but from the perspective how I feel and my mind is still active, I would say I'm just in the 20s.
I stopped growing when I was 12. That's my wife tells me that all the time.
Oh, man.
But we'll just get off of that and get on to some more topics that might be interesting to people.
Such as in the area of, would you please introduce yourself, Phil, a bit in the way how you would like to be received and known for?
Oh gosh, I've been really lucky my entire career, because I've gotten to do the two things I love the most. One is play with data. I grew up at a time when the first computer games came out, and they were on a Commodore and things. And I just hated it. I hated games because I knew somebody coded it, so I knew I could crack it. I mean, it was as easy as that. But then I discovered data. And I discovered data. And I got exposed to data when I was 17. Long story, but yep, at 17, I started playing with data. And data has just been my love, particularly data about people, individuals, everything associated with them. The other topic, of course, that leads you into that is, what does that help you do? And my other sort of place where I spend all my time is trying to figure out how people make decisions. I call it customer journey, but you can call it whatever you want. It's basically not how we want to sell, but how do people want to buy? And I think with those two topics, I've had a blast. I just have a blast because they never stop.
What do you think are the differences in between what you want to sell and how you want to sell and how customers want to buy?
I think there's an absolute total day. I mean, it starts first with the language we use internally. I mean, if you think about it, we talk about targeting, we talk about lead, we talk about opportunity, we talk about closing the deal. I have never met somebody in my life who went home and said, "Hi, honey, I identified myself as a lead today."
Yeah. Who among us thinks of our lifetime value as a customer?
Exactly.
No, I want to buy a pizza.
I've identified myself as a high value customer with plenty of customer lifetime value potential for them in the future. And no, what it is it goes back to basic psychology. How do people make decisions? Am I going to drink a Coke? Am I going to drink a glass of water? And we go through certain things of gathering information and making a decision. And that affects everything we do. Sometimes it's an easy decision, but particularly in business to business, that can get really, really complex and involves teams of people. And I guarantee you, in today's world, the way people go about, the way businesses go about making a decision for something major is not how people are trying to sell. And it's not that you have to change your selling structure, but if you don't understand how your audiences are going to buy, you're missing a lot of tricks. You're not going to be able to tune your organization, your CRM, your teams and everything. And I spend a lot of time on this. My children tell me, all heard me say this before, my children tell me this is common sense, Daddy. They pay you to do this. But for most companies, they absolutely do not understand the buying perspective or how people buy. They understand how to sell. And that's just, so the combination of the data combined with that is just something that I just love to do. It's not rocket science. I mean, if Ralph and I could do it, anybody can do it. But
thank you, sir.
I'm right in there with you, dude.
Well, it's worth saying that common sense isn't all that common and doesn't always make sense.
Yeah.
Exactly. I agree with you, Marshall. That's the challenge. And sometimes you just need to break out of your mold and take some other perspective. And this is something that I do over and over and over again. And it never stops because people change, not the steps they go through, but they change the ways they go about getting information. They change their priorities of what's important to them. They change the ways they want to be interacted with. So you're constantly having to ask that question. So what do the customers think? What do they think of this process? I can throw in a great story. There's a green energy provider up in the north of Germany. And if you're selling green energy, let's face it, you can only be 100% green energy. You don't get an advantage by being 110% green energy. I mean, you can only be 100% green energy. And if you're not careful, you end up competing on price. I'm 100% green and I'm cheaper than all my competition. And so what this organization does is they put a tremendous amount of effort into all the different phases of how do people make a decision to go green? How do they go through and figure it out? And most importantly, afterwards, how do they make sure that they keep supporting those individuals in that decision? And it costs them a bit of money, but it means they can charge a premium for their green energy products and still get customers flocking to them because they're focusing on the experience from the customer perspective. It's probably the best example I have. I mean, green energy is green energy, right? I mean,
it seems like
as long as it's not yellow.
Yes,
it has the same color as the non-green energy, which brings me to my one of my favorite sayings. So that the typical marketing mix piece, the four of them, price, place, promotion, product, are more and more commoditized.
Yeah.
Means they are not distinctive, differentiating at all. So what is remaining as differentiating then? Well, you already said part of it, but
I think a lot of it's experience. People, 80% of a decision is made based on emotion and social context. It's not facts. Facts are basic, but it's they're not making a decision about the facts. Yes, the thing you're looking at has to be good. Here's a funny story. I once had a company, I won't even tell you the industry because you'd figure out who it is very quickly. They came to me and said, Phil, we've heard you say it's 80% emotional and social, and we want to affect the emotional and social decision. Can you help us? And I said, well, maybe let's sit down and talk. And what they said was, I said to them, well, why is social and emotional so important to you? They said, because our product is crap and it doesn't work.
Oh yeah, I knew that was coming.
And I said, okay, so there is a basic, and this actually comes from Martha Rogers, Dr. Martha Rogers of Peppers and Rogers. She said, you kind of have to have a product that works. That's kind of a baseline, and then we could do a lot of these other things to try to influence and get people to come our way. But you do have to have a basic product that works.
That is helpful. And at the end of the day, I would say a differentiator to a lot of crap which is on the market, which is not working, and you have paid your price for. But finding out it on the hard way that it is not as good as it was promised comes to the point that the one-to-one conversation and the one-to-one, let's say, a personalization approach. Yeah. In the old days, when you have been with Don and with Martha, and after you experience with SAS Institute and them, you came to a fantastic age, such as when technology made it possible that we could go out with automated tools, starting what is now marketing automation or even robotic process automation, to throw the ball into the ring, to let you Phil and Tom, jump on the ball I throw in, such as where is the future, and do we have a potential opportunity that we do something like mass customization in an individualized personalization journey and experience? And how is RPA helping or not helping?
Well, let's go back to the history just for a minute before Thomas and I jump in there. It's first off, the whole concept of one-to-one has been around since the early 90s. It was invented by Martha Rogers and Don Peppers and Rogers, the famous one-to-one marketing gurus. They were the ones that came out with the concept. I had the joy of working with them as a partner here in Europe for quite a while. And there it was always a vision. And the problem with that vision was we didn't have either the data or the technology. There were only certain things we could do. Roll forward 20 years. We have a lot more compute power. We've got a lot more touch points. We've got a lot more data coming in. So these things should be more possible. I guess the real question is, why does it still seem to be so difficult? That's probably one of the good questions. But the concept's been around for a long time. It's just now I think we can actually start doing it. Thomas, what do you think?
Well, now we have a fat word for it. It's called hyper-personalization.
Ooh, yeah.
So the concept is there for ages, as you say. Okay. The technology, the data probably was there too.
Yeah.
Now we have the grunt, the computer power, in order to work with all this data, and we have the algorithms, or many of them. Well, the AI comes into picture. I don't want to run, and I will not run into an RPA discussion with regards to that topic. what is still missing, I think, is one C, context, because that's hard to establish, and there are only, from a vendor point of view, only very few that get that right. In order to provide get that right, providing the technology and the thought model that's behind to
I think there's
work
three
with
things that,
context.
I think there's three things that are going around when it comes to context. First off, the industry came from three different technology directions to kind of focus in on the problem. One was the CRM angle. So in other words, these are our humans, we want to give them systems, we want to have them interacting, but they came from a very, let's face it, most of the CRMs are just extremely complex databases with some screens on the front and some bells and whistles to make it a little easier, but that hurts, I know, but it still it still amazes me that every single CRM I know, and this is a topic for maybe another time, but they're all still built on the same normalized tables underneath the covers. I'm still waiting for somebody to do it differently, but that's another story. But the CRM came from one direction. How do we get our people who have to interact? Campaign management turning into marketing automation came from another angle, saying, for those touch points that we could sort of control and manage, how do we do that? And the third one, of course, was coming from the analytics side, saying, with all this data, what can we do? And you sort of have all three of them dancing around the issue of connectivity. And I'm every single one of the major players can offer you sort of all three of the pieces, but I don't know of anybody that's actually pulled that together automatically in every single situation, because of course every decision-making cycle in every industry is going to be different, and there's still a lot of handcrafting that has to go to get those things to work together so that you can actually get the connectivity right for the target audience and what they expect. I mean, one of the things that goes back to this customer perspective that I always talk about, the customer doesn't give a toss what CRM is behind you. The customer doesn't give a toss what marketing automation is there. The customer doesn't give a toss whether you're doing AI or not. All the customer wants to know is, I know where I am, and if you're helping me by at the exact point I am in my individual decision-making journey with the right sort of stuff, I'm happy and going to keep going with you. If that means you figured out that I want it delivered online in the right way, that's great. If you've helped me figure out that now is the time for me to take those last 5 questions I have and maybe talk to a human about them, that whole thing needs to be worked through. And I don't know of any vendor. I mean, a lot of them give you a lot of the pieces, no question. But there's still a lot of tailoring, which is why I think the partner community around CRM and marketing automation is still quite strong and making a lot of money, because they've got to come in and they've been given the ingredients, but there is no one recipe, and then they have to figure out what the recipe is for each of the different organizations. Is that oversimplified, or have I just been out of it too long?
No, I think that's a fair statement. I mean, in the end, everything that these vendors are selling us are toolboxes. And toolboxes that will eventually give you the ability to do the same things. CRM has been, in my opinion, more or less commoditized for a pretty long time. It's just how you work with it in your particular organization that's different.
Or how easy it is to work with and tailor and mold into what you need. Yes, I agree with you there. Yeah.
But that's, like you say, the customer doesn't care. The customer wants to know which of your products is going to work best for me. Can you give me a deal on it? Where is it?
Well, it's actually more than that. I think the customer starts out, we all go through a phase where we first off say, I need to make sure that I'm well informed. I'm not really looking at things yet. I want to be well informed. Are you helping? If you happen to be the organization that helps me become well informed and realize I'm not ready to buy yet, but you're helping inform me, then I'm going to remember your name. Then I'm going to start going through and making some decision criteria, either automatically or in a very structured way, like in a big B2B decision. If you're there to help me make that criteria, then I'm going to remember you're there. Then we get to the point where products get introduced. And I'll tell you what, if you've been able to do things for people, as you say, a lot of products are commoditized. And even if it's not, the customer sees all the products as commoditized. And, if you've been able to help in the right way at the right time, a lot of this, I think one of the challenges we have with organizations is the KPIs on marketing and on the senior sellers is still very much driven on this classic outbound Rolodex. I'm going to go hammer it, and I'm going to make this many 100,000 calls, and I'm going to hit my numbers. And you see, I'm doing all the right things. And I'm not sure that the internal KPIs, the early KPIs, not the ones that say you have to close contracts, because that's always going to be there, but the early ones that say you're doing the right sort of things are actually in tune with how people are making decisions, and that's a shame, really.
And it comes to the point that we are still on the, let's say, on the old school time frame, coffees for closers only, and that they haven't developed the reptile brain to a further step forward. Yeah, that makes me mad.
Well, I think with anything, it's like a lot of people know that I live in Germany. Yes, I am American, but I live in Germany. So this is something that Thomas and Ralph can relate to. There's certain industries that they're not going to change until they start failing. I think a fantastic example of that, we can compare, Marshall, with you over in the States, is the banking industry. The banking industry in Germany is ancient compared to what's going on in the US and Holland and a couple of the other countries.
Ouch.
And the reason is that there's still
there are quite some banking things over here that are ancient in the US.
That's true. That is also true. That is true. Yeah. But there's a couple of things that have changed, and I would agree with you on that, Thomas. Yeah. I mean, a checkbook. What's a checkbook? Yes, exactly. But there's certain things that an industry won't change until they feel the pain.
Yeah.
We've gone through that in a lot of industries. Banking's that way, telco's that way. Yeah. Interestingly enough, I think utility has been forced to go through and do that a little more, because all of a sudden, it's not enough to just offer electricity. But the industries where it's still sort of kind of working and we're still making money, they're not thinking about different ways of doing things, different KPIs, things like that to measure early success.
Yeah, but with banking, it's visible. All those fintech startups that eat, well,
and they're eating everybody's lunch.
Retail banks' lunch. Yeah. So if I look at those analyst bank and investment banks, they are still making an obscene amount of money, I'd say.
Yeah. I can mention one that's interesting in the state, Marshall. I don't know if you know the company Kasasa. I had the privilege of working with Kasasa over in the States on a project, and there's some public information, so I can talk about them a little bit. It's interesting what they're trying to do. For those around the world that don't know the United States, there's a tremendous number of small banks, co-op banks, little tiny banks. It's not just 5 banks in the country. There are literally tens of thousands of small banks in the US. And what Kasasa does is they're trying to provide the little banks an infrastructure so that they can compete with a lot of the new modern things with the big guys, with the really big names in the States. And what's interesting there is they've put an extreme emphasis on helping these small banks identify early opportunity, which goes back to the customer journey. So it's not just the technology, it's how they're using the data to try to help these bankers identify early opportunity, because every small banker thinks he knows all his customers. I know all my customers. And of course, that's not true. And so they're doing some really interesting things there to try to use some of this data knowledge and put it in a form that these small and regional banks can actually use it a part of their services. to, help focus on the right things, not waste their time, help the customers with the right sort of product offering. It's really fascinating watching how they do it. So it's not just the technology, it's the technology combined with the data and what they're trying to do to offer that. That's really interesting.
I would
Doesn't
love
that
to
sound
see
an
more
awful
of that.
lot like DoorDash for banks?
Like what?
Sorry, Marshall. DoorDash for banks?
I
What
don't
is
know DoorDash.
You don't know DoorDash? DoorDash, well, Uber Eats, the same. They are aggregators. They deliver to you and use all those tiny, also bigger restaurants as a backend and work with them. Same concept. So they aggregate services. And now the fun part of it, and that makes it really interesting now, they have the potential of disintermediating the restaurants.
Yeah.
All of the sudden, the customer's no more the bank's customer, but the restaurant's customer, but DoorDash's customer.
Yeah, because it becomes easy for them to say, okay, we know the sort of style of thing you want. Here's the sort of interesting thing. Yeah, I'm always very, very, very careful. I mean, this goes back to my other title of data whisperer. Data can tell us a lot. And yeah, you can call me a data miner or a machine learning or whatever you want to call it. But data whisperer is great because it explains to my mom what it means. Bless her soul. And when you look at data, there's so much you can do with it, and I think you have to be very, very careful that you're doing the right sort of things with it. It's so easy. It's so easy to abuse what you can learn from the data. I mean, I know that any person that clicks on 4 things on a news feed, I know what you want. I mean, I can create a model that you click on any 4 things, and I know what you want to hear. I know what you want to hear. And if I feed you only what you want to hear, you'll like me a lot more because I'm telling you what you want. Of course, the best example there is when my wife and I are sitting next to each other, and she gets something for red shoes, and I get something for blue shoes, and it's from the same person who's saying red shoes are the best, and to me they're saying blue shoes are the best. And you can compare notes and say, hang on, they're just using the data to feed you what you want. So I appreciate and I know how to use data to help people do the right things. I also know that it's very, very, very scary how we can abuse it, and don't know how to control that, actually.
And I'm afraid that we do have not only Alexa and Siri and a lot of other friends, electronical helpers for our convenience, which are the most highly sophisticated technical tools which help others to make George Orwell's 1984 and the dreams and nightmares on the other side of other people which would care for their privacy, whereas the Ministry for State Security in the former DDR would have loved all that lovely toys to observe people and get them in the right directions, or what China is doing these days.
I think for me, though, from a business perspective, yes, there's rules. There's GDPR in Germany, in Europe. There's new rules in California. There's new rules coming out all the time. From a business perspective, though, you never want your customer to think you're abusing the data. You never want your customer to think you're abusing the data, that they're doing anything. So the logic should always be in there. Are we doing things with the data that they've given us permission to use that they're going to see as a positive and not as a negative? And I think if people go in with that orientation towards data, it certainly makes it a lot easier to make the right business decision. It's an interesting one. It's an interesting one. Marshall, it's one of the interesting things for me being an American living in Europe, but also being America, is this different perception of data privacy. and what is private and how should it be used, et cetera, et cetera. It's really interesting working around the world and getting the different perspective of data perspective. But if you collect it legally, and by the way, that does not mean you go out and buy all the names that somebody offers you and dump them into your CRM.
Right.
But if you're doing some smart things to collect and use it, there's an awful lot you can do. And then you don't have to worry about data privacy, at least from having it limit your business and the way you move forward.
Well, are different regions and different nations really doing different things with collecting and managing data, or is it a question of public relations? It just looks different because the United States.
It is totally different. I've been on too many cases. I'm a data whisperer. I get involved in all these data projects. It is totally different. I can guarantee you that the serious companies in Europe are taking it very seriously. Now that's because they have a huge gun at their head of the huge fines if they do something wrong, but they're not giving it mouth service. They are trying very hard. The not serious ones get slammed when they get caught, and they will get caught. I'm afraid that in other parts of the world, I was with one. Okay, this is before COVID, so this may be a little out of date now, but I was with one very senior executive of a very major US organization that basically just said, Davis shot privacy, that's just bullshit.
Well, if I ask my 14 or my 15-year-old, she says the same.
Yeah, exactly.
I recently suggested she use, well, we have an Apple Plus subscription, which comes with a virtual private network. Yeah. If you are using, well, the built-in browser, it means Safari.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
She prefers and insists in using Chrome, which is in nearly all respect inferior to Safari currently. Because, well, I don't effing care.
Yeah, well,
and you are paranoid.
A lot of people don't, but that just, from a business perspective, we just have to think what it means. I mean, we should at least stop the blatant stuff. I just got offered the names, email addresses, and personal details of every major CRM user above a certain level of income, in the United States, and I can buy it for $500.
Do so.
Maybe that's not really something. Well, first off, if I get contacted by those people, I get pissed off. Where the hell did you get my name from?
Yeah.
I don't want to be hassled by you on my private telephone. So I think there's a lot, but I've seen some very good examples of data privacy. One thing you can say, the GDPR rules have been in place in Europe now for almost a couple of years now. Before they came out and everybody understood, 4 years. Yes, it was
what I
2018.
3 or 4.
Yeah, 3 and a bit. So when they first came out, everybody was shouting, "Oh my God, it's the death of marketing. We can no longer do business, et cetera, et cetera." What's clear is that it's calmed down. People do have to take care, but it doesn't hurt your business if you do it correctly. As a matter of fact, it can actually enhance your business. So
it was the death of bad marketing, or so we hoped.
So we hoped, and it still happens out of some places. Yeah.
So how does it help business? How can business make it help or use it to an advantage?
The GDPR
I think part of the challenge here is that when you talk about data and you talk about customer intelligence, okay, first off, you've got thousands of points coming in of data from all sorts of different places. We can collect it all. Just because you have it doesn't mean you can do anything with it. You first have to go through a process of transforming it and creating something new and fact-based. And the real trick on all of this is always to figure out, from the business perspective, where is it that we're struggling? Where is it that new insight might help us to be able to do some things better? And so what I tell people is, let's not just start trying to create new analytic models and, go off and do this stuff. Let's prioritize what would help the business the most. We're struggling with early qualified leads. Okay, so how can data and an understanding of that help us there? Or we're struggling later on, further down our pipeline when all of a sudden deals drop off, we're losing them, we don't know why they're happening. Okay, so how does customer intelligence help? And for every single one of those, if you can boil it down to specific business topics, then you can go in, at least if you know what you're doing, and I've been doing this a long time, you can say, what sort of new insight would help? And what sort of data do we need to be able to create that new insight to give us some help with this particular topic? And that's just sort of the practical way to do it. So you never boil the ocean. You never try to process all the data. It's always, let's slice off what we need. Let's step through and see if that can generate something. You have to work with the business experts. But if you're doing that anyway, stealing data never comes into it.
Yeah. But I have sometimes very clearly this perspective when we touched telecommunication organizations or energy providers which differentiated targeting like large organizations like RWE or ENBW or all their daughter companies, or as I mentioned, Yellow, for instance. So at least I have mentioned Vattenfall and enough so that nobody can blame me that I have not mentioned several. The aspect is that they treat you like shit if you are an existing customer. If you are not an existing customer, the best you can get is a friendly phone call after you have requested for some goodies as being a new customer, that they say, no, we treat them equally shitty. Answer of mein gas, my gas provider here in the region Wetterau. And I said, okay, that's okay for me. But if I see through the data and I see through the models and I see through their intent, they would not like to deliver a better service. They would like to get more money out of me. And now they try to catch it with mobility, if I would drive an e-car or a wall box, and everything they would like to grab in. But they, in the moment, from my perspective, try to boil the ocean by, for instance, getting all the data from 60 organizations into one big lake.
Yeah, it's not going to help them. I mean, that's two different things. There's two different things. One thing is the old thing about existing customers. I'm afraid that's true in an awful lot of industries, banking, telco, utilities. It's the principle of let sleeping dogs lie. If they're not complaining, as a matter of fact, if the wheel's not squeaky, don't oil it. If it's just turning and it's working, and there's still an awful lot of people who haven't gotten to the personal pain and suffering to the point where they're going to change things. So that's always been an issue. I don't think I'm going to ever convince companies to change that. All I can do is convince users, consumers, and businesses that if you have the opportunity, like I work with a business telephone service of one of the very famous ones, and he calls me every year and says, "Okay, Phil, it's time for you to cancel your contracts, because that's the only way I can help get you a good deal for next year. Yes, I'm your official business partner, and I'm supposed to take care of you, but I'm telling you quite now and honestly, cancel. And I might lose you, but if you don't cancel, I have nothing I can offer you." So
I'm so glad that you brought telecom into this, because for the past couple of minutes, I've been thinking about the history of telecom, especially the 90s, when it seemed like it was in everybody's best interests, both the providers and the customers, to do churn. Don't worry about keeping a customer, just get new ones. And for the customers, get a new deal every couple of months. And that didn't help anyone in the long term, but that's still happening to some extent, it seems.
Well, it's because financially it's still working out for them. The vast majority of customers don't make a fuss. They do just sign up again. They may moan about it a little bit, but they don't. It's the same with the banks. It's the same with and I'm not saying all of them do that, proactively and aggressively, and that they're all on the dark side and everything. But I'm afraid it is a standard practice that when you're getting your numbers and not doing anything, and shareholders appreciate that. Shareholders say, wow, they're holding on to all these people and they're not having to do all that stuff. So why not? I do know, though, that if you want to, there is a way that you can go about trying to identify those individuals. There's a lot of different things you can do in different industries. The point is, do you want to? Because at the end of the day, what you're going to do is you're going to end up giving them a discount. You're going to end up getting less money from them than you did before. I've got a great customer intelligence strategy that's going to identify the top 20% that are coming up for a renewal that I should give a discount to.
It's very interesting to see, for instance, the discussion we started in the direction of if the general behavior is mistreat your customer as long as they don't squeak and they don't run away. And this the German banks have done with their terms and conditions.
Yeah.
They have squeezed out illegally a lot of money. And if you now complain, you are forced to read 96 very small printed or unreadable without an enlarging glass or a microscope, the terms and conditions, and either you sign it or you get not shot, but they let you go. Yeah,
I think mistreatment is probably the wrong word. We're going to ignore them until they complain.
Sorry me for choosing here some more vividly words such as I'm cheated, I'm mistreated, and the moment I want to collect my money, which they owe me, they give me a kick. They don't pay me the money they owe me.
I'll tell you.
Thousands of bank customers.
I'll tell you somebody, though, that I got to work with in Turkey. This is an organization that buys past due loans. So, you would think, oh God, these guys are going to be terrible. And, they buy loans where the banks and the insurance companies say, we're never going to be paid back. So they buy it back 10 cents on the dollar or 1 cent on the dollar. And then you could say they're a collection agency and they go out and collect. This is the coolest organization because they decided not to treat everybody as if they were criminals and that they had tried to void their banking and that they had tried to do all this. And they started using data very, very early on. It's just a fantastic organization where they started very early on where, if they took a default loan from a bank, they also got a lot of information from the bank. Then the very first thing they did was they didn't go and start hammering them with you have to pay. Of course, they started sending letters, we're now servicing your loan. What they did was they try to get the person on the phone or into a meeting as quickly as possible and ask a series of questions. Because what they discovered was, and by the way, they didn't want to hear the story of how they got into the problem.
Yeah.
This is the brilliant thing. What they want to do is they want to hear the story around that individual. Are they supported by family? Are they in a stable marriage? Do they have a stable job? What's going on in these particular ways in the life? And what they discovered was that they were able to split off a certain percentage of these people and actually give them a new loan to help clear the old loan. because they knew that they just got into this situation where they couldn't get out of it. And they have the highest collection rate for default loans of any organization I have ever worked with in the world. It was like 49%. 49% default loans, where you're lucky if you get 10%.
Yeah.
And it's all because they were using data differently, and they decided, okay, we're going to start splitting these groups up. We're going to try to get this information very, very, very early on so that we can start going through different journeys with the customers, depending upon the sort of groups. Now, they're not always right, obviously, and some of them are just going to be bad. You know, it's a bell curve of humanity. There's going to be a group at the end that no matter what we do, we're just going to have to chase them, and we're just going to have to go in it because there's just, I mean, it's just the way it is. But they didn't lump the entire group into there. They said, okay, how can we go to the other end of the scale and strip off that, you know, that highest 25%? And it wasn't by asking them questions. It was things like, are you on, you know, is there a favorite aunt or uncle involved? Is there a favorite grandparent or parent involved? Is there, a well-to-do best friend involved? Is, you know, what's the environment of the individual? Is the environment going to help this person get out of this situation? Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And of course, it made them a fortune because it was a smarter way to go about doing business rather than just hammering on them to pay. Really, really fascinating.
I never thought that I would be that happy to hear the story of a collection agency.
Yes.
Yeah.
But wow.
This
and it is
factor.
true. It is true. It is true. It is true. I've done consulting for them. When I first got the contract, I thought, oh, do I really want to help them use data to go help beat people up? You know, but the CEO of this organization called and convinced me. And once I worked with his team for, gosh, just the first few meetings, I knew that they were going about doing this in a different way.
Welcome, our favorite extra guest, surprise, Dr.
We are five.
It's only because of Phil. I'm a Phil groupie. I'm a Phil groupie for that reason.
The super fan.
Oh,
yeah, but it's always good fun.
Yeah, no, but this is an interesting point you are talking about, because I had this beside the usual stream, the discussion with Thomas about hyper-personalization, and we always think about data and AI, and I talked about co-creation. And what did I mean by this? Exactly the story, Phil, you were talking about. I think that we have to think about the bigger picture. And I think the bigger picture is really thinking completely in a new way about what is economic and what do we mean with value creation. And we have this Milton Friedman style. The business of business is business, and every business is okay. And we only optimize and maximize profits. But in former times, we had this attitude in Germany. We have this topic, I don't know if you can translate it, Ralf or Thomas, of this ehrbarer Kaufmann.
Honorable salesman.
An honorable salesman. It's someone, a seller who is honorable. Yeah.
And there are people who would treat that as an oxymoron.
I know.
Yeah. Okay, you can. Thomas seems to play the part of the cynical guy of us.
Yeah.
But what do we mean? For example, we have in German the so-called hidden champions, and they have very often the attitude to make good business, but at the same time they are thinking in sustainable dimensions. They're thinking about long-lasting relations. And for example, for their co-creation, it's more, Phil, as you said, calling somebody and really, really understanding him instead of finding some gold nuggets to get more profit out of him, out of some dark net data or whatever. And so I think
it was really interesting when I worked with Don and Martha. One of the biggest challenges was always people wanted us to come in and determine customer lifetime value.
Yeah.
And okay, what's the potential? But customer lifetime value was really about, if I do the right things, these people will have a memory and will come back.
Yeah.
And so for me, the customer lifetime value was just another way of saying, could it be a potential high value customer? And am I going to spend marketing dollars on this person versus that? So that's
Or
just
even-
an internal thing. But
Or
long
even-
term, it was
Yeah.
more about, am I doing things that are going to make these people remember me in a positive way? Because if I do, and they will remember. People do remember the positive experiences.
Yeah,
They
for
remember the
example-
negative too, but they do remember the positive.
For example, the inventor somehow of the hidden champions, Hermann Sinam, he made the analysis of the differences of marketing and sales and services of the hidden champions
Yeah.
and the big international companies.
Yeah.
And they were not as good as the big companies concerning marketing, marketing automation, and all these modern things, modern
Yep.
topics, but they were much better in the personal relation to the customer. Well, it is B2B business, so very often it's easier to have it, but they were focused really on having a close relation and really having a mindset of co-creation and co-evolution and really serving the other. And so I think the problem behind a lot of problems that we have today is that the mindset is influenced by the DNA of new economy, neoliberalism, profit as as something of its own pursue, and instead of we talk about purpose and all this responsibility, but very often this is cargo cult, or this is some greenwashing or some sugar on the shit.
Coating,
But the real
well, let me ask a question of everybody here then. I always am watching out for companies that are trying to use a different business model, a different go-to-market strategy, a different way of trying to do some of these things, because a traditional business model with a traditional sales team and a traditional marketing team and a traditional this and traditional products and traditional, download test for 30 days for free and keep going, all that traditional stuff, all that other little stuff you can do about hidden champions and all these things, it's just kind of trying to put icing on something that's not very nice. Do you guys know of any company that is trying to do, actually from a business model perspective, trying to do this differently? I only know of one. Do you know anybody whose fundamental business model is trying to do this differently?
Ours.
Well, I didn't want to say anything, but
No, so
this is the circle of the holy guys with a new mindset.
Yeah, no, so there are a few companies who, in some aspects of their business model, so some functions, not totally, are looking at their success being a consequence of doing good. Yeah, so I wouldn't say that or doing the right thing. Yeah, so making the customer successful.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that those companies are permeated by this thought, but they are surely looking in some parts of their business into a model like this. Yeah.
Okay. The example you're talking about, are they admired or are they seen as a bit crazy in their area?
They
I don't think of, just to answer that, Winfried, the one that I mainly look at is a kind of an underdog.
Okay, so they are still an underdog. And
I had one in mind in India, which I would see as a non-perceived competitor and more as an underdog.
Okay.
We are probably talking about the same one.
Yeah,
think you are.
think they have this today. They launched a new product, and it's more a platform product, such as you buy for one price and get 50 products. So, and their CEO has the vision that if he gets a new customers, he can feed one more child in his home country.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I just love it. I just love it.
Can you talk about the company? Which company is it?
Yeah, we can. Shall we?
Name it. It's Marshall's turn to name it.
Okay, I believe we are talking about Zoho.
Oh,
There we are.
I got it right?
Of course.
This was my intelligent guess. Yeah.
Yes, we are fans of Zoho, the cloud CRM and other application vendor. They do not have a typical go-to-market strategy that other vendors do. They are entirely based on organic growth. They barely advertise. Getting them to publicize themselves, it's like trying to pull teeth.
Yeah.
I know a company like that.
They are, but they are very, very focused on customer success and on the success of the areas in which they are active. They build communities, they build regions. And if the company succeeds because of that, as Thomas says, it's a consequence. It's not the main goal.
In Germany, we have this a discussion about unicorns versus zebras. Zebras are now, I don't know if you have an intensive discussion about this alternative tool, but in Germany, this is somehow more the attitude towards a sustainable business. Our company was founded at the end, unfortunately, at the end of the new economy. So we were a little bit too late. But in this time, there was only one thing people were interested: the exit and this hockey stick, or how do you call this thing? Making some, or even promising someday and doing an exit before. But it was not sustainability, and it was not really establishing a sustainable customer relation. The example I wanted to mention was a good and a bad example. That therefore I cannot tell you the name, but I knew a CEO who really established a company with this attitude. And but unfortunately, he had this. I think he had the majority. I'm not. But unfortunately, one day, for whatever reason, Heuschrecken. What is Heuschrecken? Some strategic investors bought this company, and they changed. And he had a 20% profit making, and he was successful. All of that, but. Then came these new strategic investors. They changed,
and they said change the model,
and they destroyed this company.
In my space, in the data science, machine learning, that has been a really interesting topic. There's been a couple that started out with very, very, very different models. Two of them have had huge investors come in and change the model, and they have failed miserably. But I know one that is actually staying true to the cause, and it's the one I know well. And I'll be honest with you, I volunteered to help them when they were 4 people, and I'm still helping them. And that's the company called Knime, Knime, Knime like knife. And they have a very, very different business model. When you sit down and talk to the CEO, the first thing is their main product that does all the data science is real open source and free. And people think that's insane. You've got old people like my old company, SaaS, out there selling the stuff for hundreds of thousands. Why would you give it away? The goal is to get it into people's hands and have as many internal champions as possible. And what you find is this organic growth, which will not be enough in the long term. We need to do more, out there talking. But this business model that says no, it's about people in a community. It has the strongest community in this space I know of. The open source model is true. There's been money turned down by, you can imagine the investors. This is one of the diamonds in the space. Investors all over, and the owners just say, no, not if we have to change the business model, because that whole thing about getting it out there, making it open source, making sure it stays open source. They have an extra extension that they can sell to help do some of the enterprisey things a little better, and that's how they make the money. But this whole business model, and people at the competitors think KNIME is nuts. You've got to have a free trial, and you've got to have a download, and then we have to have our guys call, and they're just slowly. And I was in one organization the other day, and they discovered they have over 100 users using it every day. And they decided to get together in a community, and that true meaning of an internal champion, getting people together, doing exchanges, et cetera. And there's been a couple of cases where the big guys got kicked out because they were focused on. So this, but it's a business model. It's not just a philosophy. And maybe Zoho has that. I don't know Zoho. I know that in my space, everything having to do with machine learning and AI and all of that, KNIME has a very different business model.
The founder of KNIME has a vision, Phil, and you once told me that he wants in his world to become the next Linus Torvald, giving good to the community. And I had the honest impression that he is driven by this. And so is Sridhar Vembu, the founder of Zoho, which has a mission, and he is very, let's say, grounded in the way, like feet on the earth and with a clear view. And if you meet him on the street, you wouldn't think of a multi-billionaire just standing in front of you.
Okay. And I think, but the interesting thing about all of these examples is Zoho, KNIME, and there's probably a couple of them out there. They are trying to stay very, very true to their philosophy and their business model. They need as much support from just normal people out there, being the internal champions as possible, to keep it going. At some point, you do get to a point where you do need to put in other layers of support. When you're in there working with, KNIME is, I think, now in 93% of the Fortune 500. So, you do get to the point where you have to have people that can talk at different levels of things. But the whole business model is different. And I see this in the technology space. I haven't seen this a lot in other industries yet. I won't name them, banking, telcos, pharmaceuticals, and things. We haven't seen that. In this space, though, I'm seeing a few of them emerging. It's going to be fascinating watching how they do. Personally, I hope they're extremely successful, because it feels right. Just think of myself. When I left my old employer, I had to give my license back. I was one of the high priests of my old company. I could do everything with it. And all of a sudden, I wasn't allowed to do anything without getting out a very, very, very big credit card. With something like KNIME, I download it, I use it, I can take it wherever I want. There's no license on it. At some point, if I get to the point where I've got a big enough team, maybe I can use some of the extra stuff. But this whole concept of trying to give the individual everything they can use without limitations, you don't even have to register, means that snowball of the community over time gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I look forward to supporting more companies like that. Zoho, if that's in the CRM space, great. KNIME is in the data mining space. It'd be really, really nice to see one in the data lake / data warehousing / storage space. I haven't found one I've found some that are close but not perfect. But it's going to be interesting to see if others have this model that they can come out with.
My question is, if you have this change of paradigm or change of thinking, Usually people say data is the new oil and artificial intelligence help us to get out profit out of this oil. Phil, you already said we do not have to boil the ocean.
Yeah.
If we are not this data and profit centric from the bottom, but we start from the other way, from the customer, how will we then use data and AI, or how do we find out how we can improve our intimacy, how do we can improve our service really from a customer centric point? We very often talk about customer orientation, customer centricity, customer experience, and we have this totally enterprise profit centric mindset. But if you really have this other mindset, how do you come from this customer orientation back to the AI data supporting you to even be nicer to your customer?
Well, for me, it's all about instrumentation, and it's all about, I was talking about this earlier. We need to identify, either from the customer perspective, what do they find painful, or from our perspective, what do we find painful, because we know that if we can improve it. Then you first focus down on the data. I was in a famous case fairly recently where they had over 1,000 fields of information. And it turned out when we focused in on the business topic that was most important to us, we needed 13 columns of data.
So you do not start with the data analyst, but with the analyst of persona and pains and gains.
You start with the business topic, and knowing the business topic, then you can break it down. It's always going to take a domain expert and somebody that knows how to at least look at the data and knows the process of this stuff. And usually you can go through a very quick cycle. I love Dean Abbott, who after Michael Berthold at 9, Dean Abbott is for me like one of the gurus in this. And he's so clear. And he says, most data, most AI projects, most machine learning projects go bad because the expert that knows, how to get the data and what to do with it didn't actually sit down with the business person and figure out beforehand what should come out that's going to actually help us. He said most of the problem comes right at the very first step, where we say, what problem are we going to deal with? And so what I've started doing is I just mock up blank sheets of paper and say, okay, so if this is the business problem, if I give you this sort of thing, sketch out a chart or a column with some new information or something, is that the sort of thing that's going to really help us? And they'll go, no, actually, that's not what I need. What I need, and then you go back and forth, and it's that very early business defining step of how do you hook the two things together that's going to ensure success, because then you know which part of the data lake do you need, what can we ignore. I did this a long time ago. There was a public presentation, so I can mention the name, with Deutsche Telekom, who has more data. It's just really cool, all the data. But they actually went through, and we actually went through a thing that said, okay, based on the topics we're focusing on, based on the part of the customer journey, what data do we have here? Forget the rest. For this problem, what do we focus in on? And I think that's the way you start. Is you get the two people together and decide very early. I am going to have to go because I love talking with you guys, but I have something to do. I'm singing in a hospital. There you go. That's my good deed for the day. And I have to go help sing in a hospital with a mask. It's going to be very interesting.
Does anybody know that you're going to do this, or are you just going to go there?
Yeah, the hospital staff has asked me to come help. I'm not a bad tenor.
Thank you that you took yourself the time being with us again, and that you might be a little late, even if you hurry up for your
for my choir.
donating and singing. Wow.
And I'm gone.
Oh, okay.
See you. That was so fun.
Thank you also, Winfried, for joining us on the fly.
It was a pleasure to be as a non-expert in this super guru roundtable.
Who's really an expert anyway?
We are only the dumb ones. We invite and make the smart ones appear.
I always said to other guys, you only have to be this 5 centimeter or whatever ahead. Sometimes but you have this centuries of experience here all together. being this old wise man, wise. No, this wise man.
Let's go backstage.
Yeah,
but thanks to everyone who attended. So
everybody
we'll end the broadcast now. See you next time.
Yeah, okay.